The topic I'll be discussing today is carbohydrates and lipids. Now, from the term carbohydrates, it's pretty obvious that it contains carbon and hydrogen. You can add to that oxygen as well. The general formula of carbs is CxH2OY. It is produced by plants through photosynthesis. That's why we get the carbs we need by eating plants. But now it's kind of different since we have a wide variety of options to consume. Carbs can be divided into two branches, simple carbs and complex carbs. Simple carbs can be further divided into monosaccharides and disaccharides. Complex carbs are basically polysaccharides. Monosaccharide is a simple sugar that is the basic subunit of a carb. They contain 3 to 7 carbon atoms and are solids at room temperature. Because they contain polar hydroxyl, they are soluble in water. Fructose and glucose are both monomers. They have the same formula, but different structural formulas. How is that possible? They both contain 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms, but the arrangement of the atoms differ. Fructose is the sweetest. People usually refer to it as fruit sugar. Glucose is the most important saccharide nutritionally and is the most abundant in nature. Unlike glucose, fructose is not regulated by insulin. As a result, it does not trigger the release of leptin, which is a hormone that causes us to feel full. That's why fructose is usually linked to unhealthy weight gain. Also, in a water solution, fructose forms a ring made of 4 carbon atoms and 1 hydrogen atom. Meanwhile, glucose forms 5 carbon atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Disaccharides are sugars that consist of 2 monomer units that are joined together. They are water-soluble. Sucrose and lactose are disaccharides. Sucrose forms when glucose bonds to fructose, and lactose forms when a galactose molecule bonds to a glucose molecule. Now here's a fun fact. Human milk is 7% to 8% lactose, but cow's milk is only 4% to 5% lactose. That's why infant formula is enriched with lactose to simulate human milk. There are 2 types of carbohydrate reactions. The first one is condensation, the second one is hydrolysis. Condensation is a reaction in which 2 molecules of the same molecule combine. For example, glucose and fructose result in sucrose and water. Hydrolysis is basically the opposite of that. Hydrolysis is a chemical reaction between water and another substance to form 2 or more new substances. Disaccharides and polysaccharides are broken down by hydrolysis. So, if you reverse the process, you'll get the reactants of condensation. Now, another fun fact. What is lactose intolerance? Some people suffer from lactose intolerance, and that's because they can't release the enzymes that help them break lactase into glucose and galactose. Complex carbs. As I said before, complex carbs are polysaccharides. A polysaccharide is a carb made of long chains of complex sugars. Polysaccharides include cellulose, starch, and glycogen. Glucose molecules in cellulose chains are arranged in such a way that hydrogen bonds link the hydroxyl groups of adjacent glucose molecules, forming insoluble fibrous sheets. As I said before, starch is a polysaccharide and its monomers is glucose. The biological significance of carbs, it's very important to perform the regular functions of any organism. First of all, energy production. So, it is very important in the process of cellular respiration because it gives us energy to perform life processes. Second of all, red blood cells are only able to produce energy from glucose, and the brain is also highly sensitive to low blood sugar. The second thing is energy storage, and the third point is pairing protein. I put them together because they're very related. So a very good example is marathoners. They tend to consume a very high amount of carbohydrates because If the carbohydrates are depleted in their muscles, it may cause them muscle spasms and so on. And if they finish the carbohydrates in their muscles, they tend to use the protein stored in their liver and eventually the muscles, which is very unhealthy if they do that for a long time. The fourth benefit is fat sparing. So as I said before, we tend to use carbs before we use the fats in our bodies because carbs are much easier to burn or to get energy from. So when glucose levels rise, your body stops using lipids as an energy source. This is because your body is stimulated by insulin to not use fat. The result, your body cannot produce ketone bodies. Ketone bodies are an alternative energy source that cells use when glucose supplies is insufficient during fasting. However, too many ketone bodies can result in increasing your body's acidity, which is of course very unhealthy. The fifth benefit is building macromolecules. Some glucose is converted to ribose and deoxyribose, which are essential building blocks of important macromolecules, such as RNA, DNA, and ATP. Benefit is it aids digestion. When people eat, it speeds the movement of food through the digestive tract. Now, moving on to lipids. Lipids contain a high percent of carbon and hydrogen atoms. They are not soluble in water, but are soluble in non-polar solvents. You can just remember the picture of oil floating on top of water. Lipids can be divided into fats, steroids, and phospholipids. And these three sections or like levels can be further divided into other branches as well. Fatty acids consist of a long nonpolar hydrocarbon tail and a polar carboxylic acid functional group at the head. The hydrophilic polar heads are insoluble in water because of their hydrocarbon chains. They are the simplest lipid molecules. There are two types of fatty acids. Saturated fatty acids contain no carbon-carbon double bonds, and unsaturated fatty acids, one or more double bonds in the hydrocarbon chain. Triglycerides are formed by condensation reactions, and they contain 3 fatty acids. That's why I started with hydrolysis and condensation, then I moved on to this point. Fats and oils. They are very different, although we usually regard them as the same thing, but they're very different. Fats come from animals, and oils come from plants. Fats have large amounts of saturated fatty acids and are solid at room temperature. Oils have more unsaturated fatty acids, so they are liquids. Fats, as I said before, is used after carbohydrates. However, it has double the energy as carbs. Saponification. Lipids. Saponification is an acid-base reaction. Lipids that react with the base to form soap are called saponifiable lipids. So when fat and sodium hydroxide react, they result in salt and water. The salt formed is called soap. Long carboxylic acid chain anion plus sodium ion cation. That's the physical properties of soap. Soap consists of charged ionic head and nonpolar hydrocarbon tail. The ionic head dissolves in water, and the nonpolar tail dissolves in nonpolar greases, giving soap its cleaning ability. Other important lipids. We have 2 types of lipids: compound saponifiable lipids and non-saponifiable lipids. An example of compound saponifiable lipids is phospholipids. They are similar to triglycerides in that at least one fatty acid is bonded to the central glycerol or glycerol-like units. These molecules may have phosphate groups, sugar units, or nitrogen-containing groups. Moving on to non-saponifiable lipids. like steroids, vitamins, bile acids. There are nonpolar compounds that do not form soap. Biological significance of lipids. First of all, it forms the structural components of cell membranes. As I said before, phospholipids are compound saponifiable lipids. They are the main structural component of cell membranes, and they are arranged in a bilayer, or two layers. They consist of a hydrophilic head on the outside of the bilayer, and the heads are in contact with water-containing solutions inside the cell and surrounding the cell. The hydrophobic tails, from the word phobic, it turns away, or it's away from water-containing solutions because it's hydrophobic, and hydro refers to water. There are also important signaling molecules. Triglycerides control the body's temperature. You know, when people are very thin or underweight, they usually feel cold all the time, even if it's not cold. They also have the body maintain balanced hormones. For example, adipose tissue secretes leptin. As I said before, it's a hormone which regulates appetite. Fats also play an important role in sustaining nerve impulse transmission and memory storage as well. The third and final benefit of lipids is energy storehouses. And I mentioned this point several times before. It's because when the body uses all of its carbohydrates, it then tends to use the fats, referred to as storehouses. Thank you for listening.